Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to another episode of the Rethink Culture podcast, the podcast that shines a spotlight on business leaders who are creating intentional cultures, who see their employees not as resources to be managed and directed, but as people that need to be led and inspired. My name is Andreas Constantino, and I'm your host. I see myself as an accidental micromanager who turned servant leader, and over the years developed a personal passion for culture. And I'm also the founder of Rethink Culture, a company that aims to create 1 million healthier, more fulfilling work cultures. Today, I have the pleasure of welcoming Ron Lovett. Ron is a Canadian entrepreneur. He's host of the Scaling Culture podcast and author of 2 books, including Scaling Culture, and actually read his book, and I was recommended to him, so I definitely had to invite him to the podcast. Ron started his business at 21, which became a Halifax-based security guard company, which he grew to over 3,500 staff across Canada, and he sold it at a 24x multiple. And he's currently the CEO, and as he tells me, the Chief Community Officer of Vida Living, whose purpose it is to revolutionize affordable communities across North America. He's also the father of 3 kids, and a huge foodie. He loves to cook, and he travels to eat and cook. He recently came back from France, and he was shortlisted in one of the 12 cooks in his area in MasterChef Canada. So with all of that, very welcome to the Rethink Culture podcast, Ron.
Thanks, Andres. Thanks for having me. I appreciate that, and thanks for the kind words.
So where do we start? When did culture become important to you? When do you start thinking about culture and become intentional about it?
That's a really great question that I don't think I've been asked for a while. When I think back to the security company, so we're in the physical guarding space, right? We would do physical guarding for hospitals, shopping centers, bodyguard work. And you don't know what you don't know, right? And when I started that company, I believed that the transaction of me paying you as an employee would be enough for you to be thankful enough and perform your work. And I think that as young entrepreneurs, we kind of think that. I certainly did. And then eventually you get to a place where the most stressful thing about your work is the people. I always say, like, it's the soft stuff, being the people side, is the hard stuff. You'll always find capital, you'll always find customers, but managing, getting the right employees, getting them working well together, enjoying that, for the most part, enjoying the ride with them and performing something and being aligned to do something together, that's very difficult. And there was nothing at that time that was helpful. I mean, that was early 2000s. And I would say that even when the word culture was used back then, it was really used in this like that's fluffy, like that's BS, And my first aha moment of like, I wonder if there's a different way, was actually reading the book Nuts by Southwest Airlines. I don't know who wrote the book actually, but it was about Herb Keller, who's passed away. And I just thought, wow, there's always this moment, which I don't know if it was in my second book, but I'm reading this book. I was coming back from Florida and flying through New York, and I was at the end of the book, and I just read, Andreas, about Herb Keller wrote an email to their entire staff. I think I can't remember the exact story. Delta or one of these airlines had dropped their pricing, and he wrote an email and he said, in a memo, he said, "We're at war. We all need to band together. We need to execute service like our customers have never seen. We are in the battlefield." And the next day, as the book says, people from the folks that on the front lines, checking customers in, pilots, folks putting the baggage on the plane, they came to work with war paint on. And I thought, you really, I just thought, that's incredible. And like, is that true? So this is interesting. I was flying from Florida back to Halifax. I'm in New York on a layover. I'd never flown Southwest Airlines. I couldn't put the book down, but I just finished this part. I had maybe 2 chapters left, and I walked by a counter, and there's a young man at the counter. And so I want to call BS. Is this real? Is my question, because sometimes I think there's fluff. I think sometimes you talk to
Mm-hmm.
CEOs, you're like, really, you say this, but let's
Mm-hmm.
look under the hood. What's really going on? Would your employees say that? And so anyway, I go to the counter and this gentleman's there, and I go up to him. I've got the book behind my back, and I said, "Excuse me, I'd like to ask you a question." He says, "Yeah, what is it?" I said, "Do you like the company you work for?" And he looks at me confused. He said, "What?" I said, "Southwest Airlines. Do you like the company you work for?" I press him. And he says, "Sir, I don't know if you're looking for a job, but I can tell you this is the best goddamn company to work for on the planet." And I was like, I'm sold. I mean, I just at that point thought they did it. And I read this book. This guy, I don't even know if he read the book, but he loves his work and he's proud. And and I just thought, I don't have that. I need that. And so I had then aspired to change everything to do that. And I knew, Andres, that we had an uphill battle, and it was going to be more challenging, and only because
How many people were you at the time? Sorry.
yeah, I don't know, probably,
Was it early on
yeah, there
or
was 600, something like that, and
yeah?
but so I knew we had an uphill battle because Southwest Airlines, they would pay their employees much more than I could ever afford, right? You're talking security guards that make $11 an
Yeah.
hour that don't meet
Yeah.
me. There's no manager at the airport or at this,
Mm,
they work at our
mm,
customer space in a mall that you do a 12-hour shift and hand their keys
mm,
to someone else. And I just thought, we have a lot of work to do. I believe this now, and we are going to have to figure this out. And so I was on a mission to do that, and then started you probably know some of the
mm.
stories, study companies like Starbucks, and they were our competitor. After I read Francis Frey's book,
Yes.
Uncommon Service, I thought, our competitor's not in the space. We have to be the best at customer
Mm,
service, and Starbucks is the competitor, and
mm,
let's study them. And so I became very, very focused on culture, and that was a big aha moment for me, and a look in the mirror moment as a CEO that said, I'm not going to hire someone to do this. I need to do this. This is the way forward. And that book was a pivotal moment for me, where I was, I certainly was in a place to think, I'm not enjoying it. And I can tell you that if you're a CEO or leader and you're saying that, and by the way, you're saying that consistently, I'm not enjoying this, it's draining my energy. You need to look
mm.
at your leadership. You need to look at your company. It's in your control. And so it was a big look in the mirror moment.
And what was the arc from that moment to you writing a book on culture?
Well, I mean,
Because you were heavily invested
yeah,
when you wrote the book, right?
yeah. It was interesting. So and we talked before we started. So my first book, Outrageous Empowerment. The first book, there was two things. One, I love stories, right? I love a good story. I love, Phil Knight's Shoe Dog, Lovett. I
Mm-hmm,
talk
mm-hmm,
about,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
there's just so many business storybooks that people were writing at the end of the journey or close to the end. And I thought, why wouldn't as life comes in chapters. And why not write about a
oh yeah.
chapter that to me was a very impactful? It had starting a company, and an end. I sold that business. I was 36 years old, and I had my first child. And I'd learned so much. This was not an arc. This was a roller coaster up and down. And I thought, the book was meant to tell that story, and it was meant to tell people, look, you absolutely, if I could do this in private security, you can do this. It certainly lacked the how, which is the second book, which is that you read, Scaling Culture, which is the follow-up book. But this story was just to be like, it's not easy. I fell on my face and fell again and learned and adjusted and learned. And then finally, we caught some momentum and things were different. These security guards, they were what I call passionate stakeholders. They didn't have equity in the company. They had a stake. They had a voice. They had a stake. And that was a very different business. And people said you couldn't do it with security guards. Well, we did it.
Mm. Quick digression. I had someone in the podcast a few episodes ago talk about turning a waste management business into a service first business. And he started in waste management because it was a business that was in dire need of a service first attitude. And but I mean, it goes without saying, I think any business can have a service first attitude. My
Absolutely.
my question is, how did you start turning around this probably culture by default into a culture by design?
Yeah, so it's interesting because that moment, and I see this in leaders and entrepreneurs, when they start to be like, oh, something needs to happen now. And then when they start to go to the other side, I'll call it a different type of leadership, to believe and lean into culture, it's pain. It's pain because what happens, and I wrote about this in my first book. I don't know about the second, but I had to start from scratch. I had to rebuild the company with individuals that were aligned with
Mm,
that vision. And so the entire leadership team had to go. Now, this is what
wow.
I'm talking about, Andreas, is most people don't have that type of courage. They stop in their tracks and they try to find some balance. Let's bring on some
Yeah.
new, fresh people with the old people that don't align, Michelle's been here too long, and so's Marty, and we
Yeah.
can't lose them,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. Yeah.
they can't do it, and they retreat, and they retreat. And I didn't retreat. I kept moving, and it was painful. But look, it's worked out. I mean, our culture today, I believe, at Vita is world class. We just had our leadership meeting, and I said, I don't know a company, and I'm competitive, that beats us in culture. I don't know anybody. And we have to. It doesn't mean that we're at the pinnacle. We have to keep building and growing our culture and updating and upgrading. But we have a fantastic world class culture.
How do you measure or how do you sense
Yeah.
the sentiment or the engagement or you know, the gut feeling people have when they walk
Yeah.
into work on a Monday morning? Like,
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, we do a few things. One, I just think you can test, you can feel the energy. But every week we do a shout out on it. We do have a daily huddle. Some people might be familiar with that. So on Fridays, we do a values call out, and you would attach something significant, your high of the week, and your shout out to a colleague based on a value. And that really I mean, it's the most energetic call we
mm,
have. And so it's every Friday. Everyone's like,
mm,
nobody misses that huddle. Everyone's there. Everyone's like, you know, is so excited to praise their coworkers and hoping they get a little praise and hope that their work, was fruitful for the week. And then, it's interesting. When we were talking earlier, I pulled out a sheet. So we would do a much deeper dive. We would call it like a Vita vibe check. It's our
mhm,
name for survey. And I'll share some of the questions. So our last few surveys, we thought, look, let's practice what we preach. Let's ask some questions that we might be scared to get the answer to. And I think that's important. These questions, by the way, and I'll read a few to you. If I had have asked these questions when I started my culture journey, I mean, I don't even know. It would have been pretty
you'd be
bad.
on the floor.
100%, right? Now, I feel very confident. So, here's a few questions. Do you mind if I flip
Of
through a few of
course.
these? Because I
Yeah.
think they're great. I'm proud that we asked these questions. So my work at Vita is meaningful. And by the way, you might have some of
Hmm.
these questions in your
Hmm.
survey. I'm proud to tell others I work at Vita. I feel that the leadership team at Vita cares about my well-being. Working at Vita has added significant value to my life. That's a big question.
Hmm.
Working at Vita has been beneficial to my mental health. Try asking that question. I
Hmm.
think a lot
Hmm.
of leaders
Hmm.
wouldn't do it.
Hmm.
Working at Vita has been beneficial to my physical health.
Hmm.
I feel connected to my colleagues. Working at Vita has allowed me to give significant value to my family life, and I can see myself here in 2 years. Those are our kind of
Hmm.
baseline
Hmm.
questions. And, look, I'm very proud that, our lowest score on this was the one I'm looking at was 4 on mental health. That was our lowest score, 4 out of 5. And so we're scoring quite high. And then we would sit, our process is very transparent. We get our entire group together, we go through the score, and we say, hey, 4, it doesn't matter that it was a 4 out of 5. And some people might praise that. It's our lowest score. Let's talk about what we can do to move the needle.
Hmm.
Let's
Hmm.
collaborate around that.
Hmm.
So, because we know, and I'm sure you know this with your new businesses, it's what the biggest thing you can do as from a failure standpoint is not to ask the questions, it's to do nothing with the answers. I mean, that is just the worst.
Yes.
And so It's that open town hall, open, transparent discussion about the data and about a collective discussion about what you can do about that. And then a follow-up with, thanks, that was great. Here's what we're doing, and let's check it again. And it's an important flywheel. I'll go to Jim Collins' flywheel. You need to have that same type of thing with the data and execution. So,
Yes.
we're really
Absolutely.
proud. I've never heard anybody ask those questions before, those specific ones. And so we really wanted to get to the meat and say, look, if we're saying we're world class, we damn well better be world class. And so it's good. We're feeling very proud.
I remember one of Arnie Malham's practices is to have every single employee comment replied to publicly, at least within the company. And I think it's in his book. If not, I heard it from him. But he says that you should not read these comments on your own. You should definitely have someone sitting next to you, because some of them are pretty, difficult to digest, especially at the beginning when he started changing his culture. But
that's right.
That's probably the kind of most extreme you can get in being super transparent with everything, because people can be very vocal and opinionated.
And you're right. And Arnie, I can tell you that if Arnie was to build a new business today, he wouldn't go through that same, that same cliff of those types of comments. It would just be different. He would be aligned from the beginning, know who he's screening for alignment, know how to manage better. We all go through that. I don't go through that anymore either, and so it doesn't mean, look, no one's perfect. There's people that have bad experiences still at my company today. And then you say, what's going on? Is it a misalignment? Let's get to it. And let's fix it. And sometimes that fixes, this is just not your home. I've been using this analogy lately. We're kind of on a rebuild on our finance and admin team. We've scaled so quickly. We just blew out the team that we had. And I've been saying that, there's two types of companies. I got this from a friend of mine, Wayne Crowley. He used this analogy. Vita is a pirate ship. And then some companies, huge companies, are Navy ships. And to sometimes recruit a Navy member to get on the pirate ship, that is just doesn't work. It's very challenging to have someone come from the Navy and get on the pirate ship, where you're just trying to figure it out and you're moving all the time. The wind's changing and you don't know what direction you're going. And so that's also those are different cultures, a Navy ship and a pirate ship, right? Totally. And so it's nice. We Jody Tanner, who's one of our partners in the business and leads our people and culture, we were going through a set of interviews not too long ago, and I was talking to an individual, and we try to, in some cases, talk someone out of the job, say this is really what it is, and it's either going to draw you in or deflect you. And Arnie talks about that. And she was excited on the call, and I said, great, well, you think about this discussion for 24 hours, and let's circle back. She called Jody and said, not for me. Perfect, because if we didn't find it now, we're going to find it at some point. And so your job is to, once you get your culture set, it should be divisive. It should be attract or detract. And that's okay. You have to be okay with that. I think that's also a moment, Andreas, that even for me was like, some people don't want to be here. Is it wrong? No, it's not wrong. It's okay. Keep moving. Doesn't mean you don't need adjustments and you can't do better, but you know what I mean.
And something else I read in these thoughts is approach a misfit with love and not fear. So we're in this together, but our needs might be different, or this might not be the right company for you, or your skills might not be used as well as they could be here, or, but love rather than any pressure or any fear or any threats or any intimidation, it's so much easier.
Andres, you are absolutely right. And I've been in business now. I'm 44. I've been in business for 23 years. I've never in my life, knock on wood, I've never had a lawyer send someone a letter on my behalf. I have never had someone from HR when I'm dealing with it. That's just a cop out. I've never received a letter from a lawyer. I've never had someone sue me
Yeah.
for wrongful dismissal. I mean, I hear about this stuff all the time. I've never had it. And I
Yeah.
can tell you, I've had some sticky situations, and I'm
Mm,
always honest, and I always do it with love
mm,
and an authenticity that, to your point, I've had lots of people that don't work out, and I talk about that. I would say, Andreas, look, let's get you in here, but let's talk about that breakup today. So you know what will happen. One, we'll never pull the rug from under you. We'll have a discussion where this isn't working,
mm,
and we'll have an open discussion about that. But because we brought you in, we'll help you out. And what I mean by that is I will work my contacts to help find you the right home. And when you know that, you feel pretty darn good. I we had a guy who was our COO not too long ago, and he knew I would help him find
mm,
a home and be there for him and use contacts
mm,
and be a reference. And he just found a fantastic job, and we're high fiving, and I'm still supporting him on that human being's journey, whether it's in my company or outside. I've had, I mentioned Jody before. She left my company and came back. I talk about that story in my first book, and
mm,
everyone said, "How could you take her back?"
mm. I
That
would
would be
struggle with that.
that would be my ego, because she left to broaden her wings and try something new. Why would I take that personally, that someone wanted to try something a little different and then said it wasn't for me, and came back and said she was a fantastic employee, went to try something different and came back and said it wasn't for me, I want to come home, and no problem. I think that would be a big mistake if my ego said, nope, you're going to learn your lesson, you left. So I just don't look at it like that.
I think it requires either permissiveness or courage. And I
Right.
think in your case, it's courage.
Could be, because I don't even know what permissiveness miss. I can't even say the word. I'm dyslexic, so I'm going to go with courage.
Ron, one other thing, actually, there's lots of things I wanted to ask you about your book because you have some great stories and not just stories, but how to's building great culture. So
Yeah.
one of the phrases or words I liked is instimacy, which
Hmm.
is instantly building trust and connection. Can you talk to us about that?
Yeah, I just think everything starts with trust, right? And I always tell this story. You probably read about it in the book, where I had hired my first COO, and we had built this new office, and he came to me, and I hired him because I was mid-20s. He was 60. He
Mm-hmm.
worked for Coca-Cola. I was like, I need someone and he's a fantastic guy, by the way. Very old, kind of old school, I'll call it, old school leader, but a good leader. And he came to me one day as I was building this office, and he said, Ron, I hope you don't mind. I'd like this quote approved for $365 to put a window in my office. These are all solid doors. I think it sends the wrong message. And I'm like,
Mm,
one door with a window in it. I'm like, fine, this guy knows what he's doing. I proved the thing. So he's got the window. I used to have a sign above my door, and I'm late 20s. And by the way, back then I had 3 cell phones: Vancouver, Halifax, Toronto, rang 24/7, office going 24/7. I mean, this was me, right? It was my problem, but I didn't know that at the time. You don't know what you don't know. You just think it's everybody else. And so,
yes,
and your
exactly.
company, and it's all BS. And so anyway, he comes to me 30 days later. And he says, "Look, Ron, I don't want you to take this the wrong way, but you have a sign outside your door and it says, 'Please do not disturb when this door is closed.' I think it sends the wrong message. I think it's counterproductive to what we're trying to do. I know culture is important to you, and I don't think that's landing well. Can you take that down?" I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, I take it down. 30, 60 days later, he comes to me. He's fuming, Andreas. He can't believe what's going on. And I said, "What's going on?" He said, I don't know what's happening here. He said, "I have a window in my door, and my door's mostly open. You had a sign on your door that said 'Do not disturb,' and your door's closed. But yet, when someone has an issue, when they really need to talk something through, they come and see you. I don't get it." And I said, "This is it. The window has nothing to do with it. The sign
Mm,
has nothing to do with it. It is because, Dave, when someone joins this company, I spend time with them. I take them out for
right.
coffee, and I ask them. I don't have what I call home court advantage. Come to my desk and sit on the other side and be intimidated. That's not what I'm talking about. That doesn't create that intimacy. It is. Where would you like to go? Hey, Andreas, I'd like to take you for coffee. What's your favorite lunch spot? Your favorite coffee spot that you're comfortable? We go there, and the conversation starts. And I will say, "How was your weekend?" And you'll say, "Oh, it was great. It was great, sir." How was yours? And I was like, not great. My daughter was sick. She wasn't feeling well. I was up all
Mm,
night. Really
mm,
stressed
mm.
me out. I'm new using feelings. I was excited. I was stressed. This isn't drama. It's not oversharing. I'm just telling you that I'm human. I was stressed. I was worried about her. And they're like, oh, this is a real conversation. Like okay. And then they'll say, yeah, it's interesting. My uncle wasn't feeling well and also had COVID or whatever we're talking about. And on the waterline, John Ferguson is one of our advisors at NASCAR. Beautiful language. He says, bring the water line down. And that's what you do. You bring the water line down to have an open discussion. And that's where the connection starts. It's absolutely where it starts. And so, we work on that. It's very important. You have to be very intentional about that connection. It should be in your calendar. You need to be intentional about checking in with people. And as a leader, you should be spending a lot of your time doing that.
I recently tried another technique for creating intimacy in a group, which we use a lot in EO, in entrepreneurs organization, called Lifelines.
Yeah.
So I had a group of presidents from different chapters who really hadn't met, knew very little about each other. And we practiced Lifelines over an hour and a half. And that involved everyone spending 5 to 7 minutes going through 2 highs and 2 lows in their life. No preparation, just, whatever you have, top of mind. And afterwards, one of the presidents said, this was one of the deepest sharings I've had in 3 years. And that was a group of people he never had met before. So it's a power tool, So whether it is spending time face to face with a person or using lifelines or something else, this connection, this human connection, it's difficult to measure, but it's where everything starts. Trust, right. Commitment, results, teamwork, everything.
Yeah, absolutely.
I want to go into one of the other things that I learned from your book, which is Funishments.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, fun punishments, right?
That's it.
I want to ask you, talk about when to use them and when not to. So please tell us more.
Yeah, so this is just an idea that we came up with ages ago when I had the security company, which is, look, the command and control environment is like, it's the carrot or the stick. If you do this, we give you a bonus. If you don't, you're going to be fired, And we thought, look, it's important. Performance is important. We want people to show up and do their best. And so we came up with this concept called a punishment, which is you would commit to your punishment. And so we'd say, okay, you're a salesperson, Andreas, and we'd say, okay, there's 5 salespeople and their sales goal is to make 100,000 in revenue over the next quarter. And we'd say, okay, is that what you're committing to? Okay, so you're buying into the process, change management, very important. Yeah. I'm not telling you what you have to do. Let's make sure. And if it's wrong, we can debate that. But let's say we all agree to 100. And it's okay. What are you putting on the table if you don't hit your goal? Let's have fun here. Let's do a punishment where something that would make you uncomfortable. Is it that you have to lip sync in front of the group? That you have to, donate $1,000 to Donald Trump's, campaign? What's going to make you uncomfortable? And let's have some fun with this. And so this, it also shows you behind the scenes. Like, I don't want to do a lip sync. I'm very uncomfortable. I don't want to sing. I don't want to dance. Like, and so you can kind of have some fun. You get to know someone better, and you can really have some fun with this. And so, I think that the process is important. Someone has to buy into this, say, okay, I don't want to do this. But I can tell you that people step up their game when they commit to some type of punishment, a fun punishment that they don't want to do. I certainly do too. I make commitments, very fun and uncomfortable things that are kind of fun we can laugh at. And it just it brings that waterline down again, right? It kind of says, okay, let's have some fun with this, and I think that there is, I think people just take themselves too seriously. And I'm changing directions a little bit here, but and a lot of people and leaders know the exercise start, stop, continue, right? Mm-hmm. You get to a group of people that know each other, have been working with each other, and you say, look, let's get together. What should you start doing? What should you stop doing? What should you continue to do? We just did this with our some of our key leaders on Wednesday of this week. And I start off and I say, okay, I've got the tissue. Let's go. Give it to me. What do you got? I'm just bringing the water line down. And people are laughing because they know it's going to be uncomfortable. And I'm going first as the leader. I talk about that in my book and how to build trust. Big moments, you go first. And, so the punishment is the same type of thing. I would bring my own punishment, my own commitment first when I use that process. And yeah, it's a fantastic tool.
I remember one of our facilitators at the GLC Global Leadership Conference accelerator track. I think it was Elliot Jacobs. And he said, anyone who's late after the doors close, and he was like literally 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, like holding the doorknob and counting the seconds until the doors close. And, whoever's late is therefore a punishment. So he says whoever's late has to stand up and sing their national anthem.
Right. Yeah.
And if you're very late, you have to also dance while doing that.
Ooh, bad. I would never choose that. That's a bad one. Yeah, right. It's just having fun. And we don't have to take ourselves and the company so seriously. Let's just take the water temperature down.
Yeah.
Why can't that be a fun story when someone just missed the mark a little bit? It should be a fun story. Oh yeah, Ron had to get out and do this thing. And it was fun. And look, let's not take ourselves too seriously.
And at the end of the day, when we're vulnerable, when we are, in that case, silly and fun and just ourselves, or the child part of ourselves, we connect. We connect so much more deeply as humans. Like, I think it was Socrates, maybe, who said that you learn more from an hour of watching someone play rather than from a day of discussions, something along these lines.
Yeah, I believe that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, I back to vulnerability, and I think this came up a lot during the pandemic. And I always say that in the old, I can say old days, even when I started in my early 20s, vulnerability equaled weakness in my head.
Oh, yeah.
Today, vulnerability equals bravery, right? And connectivity. And so I do talk about that. When should you go first, and when should you go last? And as a leader, and it's very important, when you have really troubling news, you should go first. When you're uncertain, you should go first. When you need to open up and talk to the company about some challenges that the company's had, you should go first. When you're collaborating with your team, when you're getting ideas, you should go last. When you're having a discussion, you should go last. There's times to go first and there's times to go last. When you're being vulnerable, you go first. If there's a vulnerable component, in a lot of cases, you should go first as the leader.
It's a very good framework when you should go first and last. And these are very conscious decisions to be made by a leader. And that's what you expect of a leader, to be there when they need to protect the team and show the way and show the confidence and the conviction and the anticipation of the challenges, and at the same time be the last to, be the guy with a shiny new idea. No, thank you. I mean, we have plenty of those, so leader needs to speak last. Yeah, absolutely.
You got it. Absolutely. Yeah.
Moving on to something else, Ron. One of the most inspiring moments in a book for me recently was reading Seth Godin's book, Song of Significance, where he talks about essentially the need for conscious leadership. And he asks a question at the very beginning, which is, what would it take to build a company that is someone's best job ever? And to me, that's an intellectual question that is actually something very tangible. So if, and I set that challenge for myself. I said, for my new business, I want to create an environment that is at least for someone their best job ever. And so my question to you is, if you were to create a new business, I mean, you created Vida recently, but how would you go about saying, what are the 3 things or one thing that need to be in place?
Yeah. Yeah. So one, I haven't read the book. It sounds like a great book. I'll order it. And would completely agree and completely doing that. Like, I felt, and I will answer your question, but I felt in my past business because it was price sensitive. We had to bid contracts, which we had to pay humans a lower amount to get the contract. I had handcuffs on, and I thought, not round two. I'm going to do this. I'm going to build the best damn culture on the planet and build a global brand and scale this thing significantly. And so to start a company, to do the things that you read about or sort of that we spoke about that Arnie went through, I just thought, I'm not going to open the doors until I have my purpose baked in, revolutionize affordable communities, my values. I'm going to go back. I'm going to upgrade my values from where they used to be. Let's push the boundaries on these values and upgrade those and know that those are the values day one before I open the doors, right? Most companies, I had never had the opportunity to do that. And most don't. I did it on year 11 and it was horrible. It was painful. Arnie, it was painful for him too. And so BHAG, 10,000 units by 2027. I mean, these are big, these are foundational pieces. And then the last is, I really, I love Jim Collins' flywheel because all these are huge, pie in the sky. And then you have that flywheel. What do you do that's going to do the next thing that connects the next thing that creates a domino effect? And you have this flywheel turning in your business. That's for me to balance and have focus in the business. And so those are the kind of four things that we built before opening the doors. And it is a game changer, right?
And when it comes to people who are not intentional yet about their culture, what would you say they have to rethink?
Yeah. So when you say intentional, that are just, they have a culture by default.
That they have a culture by default. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. So, I think that I'm going to use maybe strong language. If you don't believe, well, let me go to a quote for a sec. You're on one side of this quote or the other. If you're listening, you're on one or the other side of this quote. And the quote is, none of us will build great companies. We will lead incredible people who will build great companies. Mm-hmm. You either agree with that or you don't. If you don't, you are in a culture. You might actually be designing a big command and control culture where you are the big dog and you make all the decisions. So you actually might be in the design phase. But I wouldn't agree with that type of design. Or you're in default. Or you're designing the other culture on the other side saying, yeah, I need to build this environment where these people love to work here. They are a passionate stakeholder. They enjoy it. It permeates into their family life, their community, and so it's a choice. It's a conscious choice, right? And so my suggestion is, if you are on one side saying, okay, I agree, I'm going to just lead people. They're building the business. I'm just leading them to do that. Then you have to look yourself in the mirror and say, what is the delta between where we are and where we're going? And usually, by the way, and this is high level, but gives context to it. It's building your values, screening for those values, making sure, and I talk about this in my book, I went through the process of, building our values out, but not screening for them. Then you'd show up, Andreas, and we'd be completely disconnected. I'm like, why did I do this? Back to my earlier story, someone left today, they'll leave in a conversation before they show up in the second interview, knowing this culture is not for me. It's fantastic. Before it was come in here and let me shove our culture down your throat. Doesn't work. No. That you're rolling the dice, right? So it's build your values, screen for the values, praise or coach someone aligned behaves in a way that really aligns with something internally or externally with the customer. Stop, everybody. Andreas did this thing. Fantastic. This is a new standard. Let's go. Or Andreas, yesterday, let's have a private conversation. And the values allow this coaching tool that we didn't have before, because it used to be, I don't like what you did yesterday. Today is our values of relentless improvement. Tell me how what you did yesterday would align with that. Walk me through that. Right. And so this creates, it's not me or you, it's us aligning with the values of a company, right? And if you do that, you will build and sustain your values throughout the organization. So it's create values. Oh, I did miss a part. Screen for the values, on board, which I missed originally, on board, make sure they do understand the values, the stories, what has worked, what hasn't worked, where they participate in those values, and then coaching and praising based on values. So it's actually that simple, right? Let's think about that. There's some work to be done in those steps. Well, I don't have an onboarding. I don't have values. Great. Well, get to it. Take my book, Outrageous Empowerment, read our values, and rinse and repeat and steal what you want. It's who you want to be in the future, not who you are today.
A couple of thoughts on that. Firstly, I think your book has a very thoughtful and comprehensive section on coaching. It's short and sweet, and I think it covers a lot of ground on what you need to be a good coach. The other thing is, I think the peer accountability, which I've really learned through EO, is such a powerful tool. So to the example you mentioned before, instead of saying to someone, well, I didn't like your behavior, you say, well, how does your behavior relate to the values of the company that we've all committed to? That is an accountability story. Like, we built this company, you joined this company knowing that these are the values and we all agreed to them. So the story of accountability is so much more powerful because you refer, or both people refer with love, not fear, to a common agreement. And they just hold each other accountable to that common agreement. And then it's not, there's no discussion about why or how, but it is, okay, let's stick to what we agreed or let's part ways.
Right.
And I have presidents in my region. So this year I'm area director in Europe in EO, and I have presidents saying, how can I get my board, which is a board of volunteers, entrepreneurs, volunteers, to do this or to do that. And I say, you start with a joint agreement. What do we want our rhythms to be, or our habits, or how often do we want to show up? How often do we want to meet together physically, virtually, whatever? And once we agree these norms, then we just hold each other accountable and there's no conflict.
Well, and the other part I would add is let's agree now to what happens if we don't. Whether it's a punishment or we're going to part ways, or let's just talk about that. Let's say if we can't get there, no problem. Like, let's get through it now. And you also bring that waterline down to say there's no pressure. We've talked today about if this doesn't work out, and how am I going to show up? So if it doesn't, if you can't commit, you're making a choice to find a new home. But that's okay, by the way. Let me help you find it. And here's how I can show up for you in that process. It puts a nice bow on it.
So, Ron, as we prepare to close, what would be something you'd recommend for listeners, like a book or something you watched or read recently?
So I'm kind of, I'm watching a lot of Ray Dalio and Principles, and that his book is fantastic. It's like a Bible to me. I'm just really slowly reading it, taking my time. I love it. Love Jim Collins' B 2.0. The update of that book is fantastic. Those are probably the two latest kind of culture book. I'm also reading an HBR talent book. It's, I think, some of the best articles on talent. I'm into that book right now, and there's some really interesting thoughts and process in there. So I'm always, I like when I get uncomfortable. It's like, okay, I haven't thought about that. Okay, I need to think about that. I'm getting uncomfortable, and that's always a good sign. So those books, but I would call some of that stuff very advanced, and I have to just caution people that are listening. It's a process. You can't skip the line. And what I mean by that is, and be cautious to move too far ahead in this process. It's one step at a time. It's create the values first. See who's lighting up on this and who's not, because, and I have unlimited vacation, mandatory life days. I mean, it's very unorthodox. But we started by pulling straws and who was getting a half day off. Like, that's where it started, right? And sometimes I forget And I know that sometimes my messages will alienate some people, and it's either that will never work in my industry, or people would never be interested in that. And look, I'm not suggesting you do what I do, but you should find your own way of bringing out the best in people. Because, right. I can tell you that Ron Lovett 2.0, as a different leader, I believe in two things today that maybe I didn't before. I went back to the transactional, approach of I pay you, and for that, I should get performance, and you should be happy, and you should be, that's all BS. Today, I believe that, look, I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that you have a beautiful experience working with me. And we will do what we can to impact and add value to you, your life balance, your mental health, your physical health, everything we can. We'll push you, you're learning. But for that, we do expect you to perform very well here. This is not a country club. It's a high-performing environment. It's going to be uncomfortable. We are going to push you sometimes, like I did with a trainer this morning. I'm not getting results when I'm not pushing and grunting, and forget it, right? So that's one, which I think is really important. And the second thing is, I also look at people as the whole individual, and these messages are connected. So it's not just Andreas, the CEO or the CFO or the project manager. It's Andreas, the individual, who has other things going on. He has children. He has his own struggles with his own family. And we used to really draw a line and say, whatever you do at home is not my business. Now it's my business. And how can I help you? And how do I help you and your family? And what are you looking for your life in the future? And how do I connect that here with the job opportunity? And by the way, if these things run out, that's okay too. And having just open discussions. So it's the whole human being versus the transaction of Andreas, the employee, I think we have to look beyond that. And so that's certainly a shift in how I look and in my leadership style.
And it's also the shift from HR to culture, right?
That's right. Yeah, we don't have anybody in HR.
We still use HR for all the events, I think.
Well, let me talk about HR. I was just going to say HR. I'm trying not to swear here. It's just it's an excuse. Oh, that's just HR. This is HR. Everyone needs to be in HR. If you're a people leader, you have high influence in your organization. You better have the HR practices, if that's what you want to call it, of leadership and treating people well and coaching. This isn't like go to HR for all that stuff, and the culture stuff's at HR. I mean, some people just still get that wrong. Everybody's involved in the culture. Everybody has an impact. If you lead people, you have bigger influence, bigger impact, which equals bigger risk or reward in your organization. It rewards you very well, or there's huge risk to a negative impact of a leader that is misaligned with your culture. You should think about that.
Ron, there's so much more we could talk about, but I know you're limited for time. And I want to keep it as well punchy to 45 minutes or so, which is where we're at. So Beautiful. Thank you for sharing your stories from your book and from your life, from your work. And thank you to everyone for listening. Do hit the subscribe button so you don't miss the next few episodes. And don't forget to tell us what you think by emailing rethink@rethinkculture.co. And do keep leading.
Thanks, Andreas. Great podcast, great discussion, and keep getting these messages out there.
You too, Ron.
Cheers.